but also doesn't neglect things like the quads and the hamstrings, which are commonly neglected when considering glute dominant workouts. And we know to effectively work the glutes, you likely do have to incorporate the quads and hamstrings to quite an extent. To be honest, I don't even think we're going to do a lengthy intro today. Every time I film a video, I'm always there like, you know what, Harry, speed up the intro. So that's what we're going to do today. We're not going to do a long intro because I need to stop waffling so much. Basically, what's occurring today is a slightly different video. And we're actually kind of testing this style of video out. I say we, but I'm testing this style of video out, and I want to see if you enjoy it. It's a bit more of an informative series about essentially the best way of developing certain areas. And to clarify, no, there is not one best way. This is just a very effective means of doing so, but saying it's the best way kind of sounds a bit more kind of cool and spicy than just saying a really good way of doing this. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean. Provided this goes well, we can turn this into a bit of a series where I upload videos every few weeks or so. Episode 1, we'll say, not episode 1 of Stranger Things, but episode 1 of the TFNL growth guide, thanks Max, he gave me that idea, is going to be glute development. I feel like the glutes are quite a desired muscle group to work for those of all genders. I figure, you know, that'll be a really good starting point, and like I said, if it goes well, we can continue it. Before we do so, we must do the things that need to be done. If at any point you decide you like the video, or actually if at any point you decide, you know what, I actually learned something from you today, then please do consider doing one of two things. I would really appreciate it if you did like the video, because 1,300 likes in the first 24 hours is going to be what we're shooting for. That is the goal, so if we reach that, that'd be bloody amazing, although I'm not particularly optimistic due to the nature of this video. I would also appreciate if you did at least consider clicking the red button down below to subscribe to the channel, and maybe if you did decide that, you know, Harry, I don't hate you, I tolerate you and you taught me something, also consider tickling the bell next to the subscribe button so you can get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. And obviously at the end of the video we do comment question of the week, so if you have any questions you want me to answer, please drop it down in the comment section for comment question of the week, and I shall do so. It's hat time, and because it's bloody summery, the hat vibes are going to reflect that. Honestly, I feel like I'm on my way to a festival right now, but the only festivals going on at the moment aren't ones that feature Lorna Shore, so I'm probably not going to be that interested. So we're going to split this video into a few sections. We'll call them chapters, if you will. And we're going to speak about the glutes. And I'm going to try and do so in a manner that covers a lot of the important things you might need to know when looking at developing your glutes, for whatever reason that may be. I also want to do so in a very simplified manner. So that's what we're going to try and tickle. When we're looking at the glutes, we have multiple muscles within the glutes. They are a muscle group, not a singular muscle. We're going to focus on 3 primary muscles within the glutes. That's going to be the gluteus maximus, so the glute max, the glute med, so the gluteus medius, and the gluteus minimus, so the glute min. The primary function of the glute max will be extension, will be external rotation, will be abduction of the thigh, and then to some extent actually adduction of the thigh as well. So the glute med focuses primarily on abduction and internal rotation, also some pelvic stability as well, but we're not really going to stress too much about that. And then obviously you've got the glute minimus underneath, which is abduction and internal rotation of the thigh, also obviously pelvic stability, but again, like I said, we're not stressing about that. Once we kind of know the 3 areas we're looking at working and how they work, that can help us identify how we can effectively work them. So to essentially effectively work a muscle group, you must consider what its primary functions are, and then you must choose movements that essentially best align with the primary functions of the muscles you're trying to work. But we're going to get to that shortly. Chapter 2. Frequency. How often should you train your glutes? It's a very short chapter, to be honest. So essentially, arguably to some extent, you can train your glutes as often as your recovery will allow you to. For most people, provided you are training with sufficient intensity and training effectively and arguably to some extent optimally, you can probably train your glutes between 2 and 3 times per week. This very much depends on your body and your ability to recover. And recovery can be influenced by a lot of things. Sleep, training volume, load management, calorie intake, protein intake, hydration, so many things. Now you've figured out how often you should target your glutes. How many sets of my workout should target the glutes? So arguably when you're looking at volume, I think we kind of consider weekly volume rather than daily volume. I think when it comes to glute workouts specifically, I would probably try and shoot for anywhere between 8 sets per week and 30 sets per week. I think realistically, if you were to do a glute session, that probably incorporated a lot of other lower body muscles as well, like the hamstrings, the quads, etc. If you were to put together a glute program that obviously incorporated the other muscles of the legs as well, like the hamstrings, the quads, etc., I think realistically, trying to do that 3 times a week is going to be very difficult, because not only do you have to consider glute recovery, you also have to then consider hamstring and quad recovery as well. Let's say you're to train them twice a week. Let's say I did 12 sets per lower body workout, and 8 of those sets place a fair amount of emphasis on the glutes by incorporating incorporating movements like split squats, etc., etc. If you're doing that twice a week, you're then totaling 16 working sets for the glutes alone, which is a lot of volume. Let's say you do that 3 times a week, you now look at 24 working sets of the glutes, which pushes us towards a higher threshold of weekly volume. So how you do it is completely up to you and your recovery, and also where you are in your training block. If you're starting your program, you may have a pretty standard number of volume that kind of just stays as is throughout your 12-week block or whatever it may be, or you may increase volume as you get further and further into the program. So you could start with, let's say, 8 sets per workout, then go to 10, then go to 12 over time, and that could be a means of progressive overload, which is obviously very important when it comes to building muscle. So the question really does fall down to is how much volume can you tolerate and how much volume can you recover from? Then you think about intensity. Okay, well, how hard should I be training? When we're looking at obviously primarily building muscle, we want to then consider and think about how close are we taking the target musculature, for this example the glutes, to failure. And by failure I mean when you can do no more reps with safe and effective technique. And the green zone for muscle building, as I know we've spoken about before, is typically around the 0 to 4 reps in reserve. Provided you're in that range, you're in what we consider the green zone. And as you progress through your program, you could probably progress your intensity, so start with 4 reps in reserve, then go to 3, then to 2, then to 1, then to 0. It really depends. There is no right or wrong. It's about doing what's best for you and your recovery. Beyond intensity, you've got to consider progressive overload. Every time you go to the gym, you want to try and do a little bit more than you did the previous week. That could be something as simple as 1 extra rep, 1 extra kilo, 1 extra set, perhaps depending on where you are in your training block. But whatever it is, you just want to do a little bit more than the previous week. And that's what we consider progressive overload. And progressive overload is a fundamental principle of muscle building, so hypertrophy. And it's something that a lot of people do overlook. Something is progress, and we love to see progress. Then we flip around to chapter 5, which is almost a final foundation chapter, we'll say, which is rest periods. You say, well, Harry, I'm training really hard, but the PT handbook tells me that for hypertrophy, I should train for no longer than 60 seconds. Again, this very much depends on your ability to recover, but for muscle building, provided you're training with sufficient intensity, recovery should typically kind of linger around the 3 to 5 minute range. But for example, if you can recover quicker than 3 minutes, then that's fantastic, and you must rest for as long as you need to rest without getting lazy with it. And don't be taking those 10-minute rest periods. You know, I see some of you, including myself sometimes. Don't do it. Eyes on you. But when we're looking at rest and whether we're ready to do another set, we typically look at checking off 4 things. Number 1, has the target musculature, so in this case the glutes, recovered enough for you to do another set effectively? Number 2, has your nervous system recovered enough for you to do another set with sufficient intensity effectively? Number 3, has your breathing and your heart, so your cardiorespiratory system, recovered enough for you to do another set effectively? And number 4, have your surrounding muscles recovered enough for you to do another set effectively? So for a glute by a split squat, for example, your surrounding muscles may be something like the grip, perhaps, maybe the quads as well, maybe your lower back even. So the muscles that aren't necessarily your primary focus of the movement, but are the muscles that are going to be working within that movement regardless. So the muscles that work alongside your target musculature. So like I said, the split squats, you consider things like the quads that work with the glutes, etc, etc. If you can tick off all those 4 boxes, then you're likely ready to go again. And typically for a lot of people that does tend to fall within the 3 to 5 minute mark, again depending on your intensity. And in most cases you'll probably take longer to recover from movements with more moving parts than movements with less moving parts. So for example, it'll probably take you longer to recover from a split squat than it would a glute med kickback. So a multi-joint movement versus a single joint movement due to the differing number of moving parts. And now this is the fun part, chapter 6, where we start getting into the nerdier stuff. The stuff that I find probably a bit too enjoyable and things that I probably place a bit too much emphasis on because I don't have much of a life. Shortened versus lengthened position movements. This is a very much a it depends answer. Again, I don't think there's any right or wrong, this is merely just preference. And typically for a lot of muscle groups, I would typically prioritize lengthened position movements first. So for example, the chest, I will likely prioritize lengthened position movements first, so like pressing movements, whereas for the glutes, I would probably actually prioritize shortened position movements first, like for example a hip thrust. And there are a few reasons why, and one of those reasons why is consideration of load used. When doing a shortened position chest movement, you're likely not going to use mass amounts of load comparatively to doing a lengthened position chest movement. Whereas doing a shortened position glute movement, you are likely going to use a lot of load comparatively to doing a lengthened position glute movement. Granted, you can use a lot of load when doing both the shortened and lengthened position movements, but for example, you are likely going to hip thrust more than you are going to RDL. And the big thing to remember about shortened versus lengthened position movements, muscles tend to fatigue in the shortened position before they do the lengthened position. So we want to try and get that shortened position prioritized first when looking at the glutes, before moving on to the lengthened position, because if we do lengthened position first, that may limit, due to the fatigue build-up, our ability to take the glutes to their shortened position effectively. We'll typically go shortened position first, lengthen after, and maybe even shortened again, but I would typically, for myself personally, I would typically start with a shortened position movement, which we'll get to shortly. And then you're thinking, well, fantastic, Harry, you've told me all about the shortened and lengthened positions, but what movements target each of those ranges? And essentially, a shortened position movement is a movement in which peak tension is occurring during the shortened position of the movement. And that shortened position of the movement is when the muscles, so the glutes, for example, are contracting. So that could be something like a glute bridge, a calf hip thrust, a hip thrust. And when we look at lengthened position movements, for example, we look at movements in which peak tension occurs when the muscle is in its lengthened position, so its most stretched out position of the rep. An RDL, for example, is what we deem to be a lengthened position movement, and the point of peak tension would likely be when you're at the bottom of the RDL, so when the muscle is most lengthened. And on top of that, you've got other considerations like squat variations, you've got leg press variations that could very much be lengthened position movements, you've got good mornings, RDLs, like I said, like a glute bias RDL. And then we flip it down to, okay, well, okay, you've told us all about that, but how would we structure an effective workout? I actually covered this exact workout, which I deem to be a very effective workout, in the Gains by Brains glute workout, but we're going to cover it again in case you missed it. Number one, we would typically start with our shortened position movement, like I said earlier. So we typically do a hip thrust, a glute bridge, a calf hip thrust, or perhaps like a 45-degree extension, something along those lines. Number two, we then look at like a movement in which we're targeting the lengthened position, which would typically be a hinge movement. So a movement that incorporates hip hinge. So that could be a good morning, that could be a glute bias RDL, something along those lines. Number three, we then look at squat variation. So for example, a squat, it could be a leg press variation, it could be a split squat, it could be a hack squat, split squat, it could be a single leg press, something along those lines. So the hinge movement will likely incorporate a lot of the hamstrings, whereas a squat or leg press movement will likely incorporate a lot of the quads, obviously, as well as the glutes. And then our final movement, we chuck in the isolation work, the fun stuff, which isn't actually that fun, it kind of hurts a lot, it's not very nice, but we consider something like a glute med kickback. So right there, we've got 4 exercise slots: shortened position, hinge movement, leg press or squat variation, isolation, kind of kickback variation. We've got 4 kind of boxes to fill. What movements you put in those boxes are completely up to you, but I've just given you an example of what you could put in there. That then places a lot of emphasis on all the muscles of the glutes that we're looking at targeting, but also doesn't neglect things like the quads and the hamstrings, which are commonly neglected when considering glute dominant workouts. And we know to effectively work the glutes, you likely do have to incorporate the quads and hamstrings to quite an extent. Regarding sets and reps, that is completely up to you and your ability to recover. Typically, for most things, I look at anywhere from about 2 to 3 sets, depending on the movement and depending on where I am in my training block. I typically don't go above 3, and I typically don't go below 2, but that's just me personally. When looking at rep ranges, I typically look at anywhere from like 5 to 30 reps, which is what we consider to be the hypertrophy rep range. When kind of gauging where rep ranges should be, is I like to kind of work within all rep ranges. Earlier on in the workout, I might do more lower rep stuff, especially if the movement has a greater potential for load, so you are likely to lift more weight on it, i.e. a hip thrust. I would typically do lower reps on that movement, like let's say 6 to 10, whereas the movement doesn't have as good a potential for load. Like for example, like a kickback, I would typically do higher reps on that, so let's say 12 to 20. The other thing to consider, which I did speak about in the Q&A, what other variables may limit your ability to take the target musculature, so the glutes, to failure? Something like a glute med kickback, because of the lack of moving parts, and it not being massively taxing on the respiratory system, for example, whether you do 5 reps on that movement or 30 reps on that movement, the glutes will still likely fail before anything else. But flip it round to the RDL, for example, if you do 6 reps on that movement, the glutes may fail first. If you do 30 reps on that movement, your lower back may fail first, your breathing may fail first, thus preventing us from being able to effectively take the glutes to failure. So when that's the case, I typically kind of focus on lower rep ranges for those movements. So like I said, you've got to consider what other variables could limit your ability to take the target musculature, so the glutes, to failure, and when might those limitations occur? Would they occur after 12 reps? will they occur from the get-go? If they occur from the get-go, it might not be a great movement to include. If they occur after 12 reps, then perhaps focus on 6 to 10. I actually did speak about this in greater detail, like I said, in the Q&A video I did recently titled Addressing the Online Backlash. I also did speak about this in greater detail during our most recent Pump Fiction podcast episode, which is always linked in the description down below, and that should be on YouTube now. If it's not on YouTube now, it will be very shortly, probably within a matter of hours, but I'm pretty sure it's already uploaded. And like I said, I go into much greater detail during that podcast if you care to learn a bit more about it. That is science-based glute training 101, essentially. Follow all those chapters, tick all those boxes, and put the pieces of the puzzle together, and you'll come up with a really effective and bloody well borderline optimal glute workout. Like I said, well, there's no one best way to do anything, but that is a bloody effective means of training the glutes. I'll tell you that for free. If you are going to train the glutes more than once a week, which I would definitely recommend for most people anyway, I would do different workouts per day. Let's say you've got 2 glute-focused lower body days, so lower A, lower B. One selection of movements for lower A, one selection of movements for lower B, but repeat those workouts, A and B, every week. And look to progress every week, but doing different workouts within the same week. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. I would love to hear whether you like this type of original, maybe more informative content, and I'd also love to hear how your glute dominant workout structuring goes. But obviously I couldn't finish the video without doing one of 2 things. The first thing is I want to credit a lot of the sources where I get a lot of my good information from. So those will be individuals like JPG Coaching, that'll be Ryan Dewars, Paul Carter has given me plenty of good information as well. Jared Feather is another individual that is a good source of good quality science-based information. And that's just to name a few. There are so many of those, but those I would say are the big ones that have helped me with my knowledge, my information, my understanding, and also with compiling this video as well. And obviously now the second thing we can't forget is comment question of the week. It's not directly a comment question, but it's something that I've seen pop up recently that I wanted to quickly address, and that's clickbait. So essentially the YouTube algorithm thrives on clickbait, as we know that. I have a few people here and there mention how they feel that they do worry that some of my titles are unnecessarily negative. I always do try and make sure my titles are kind of worded in a way that may be initially perceived as negative, but do somewhat ask a question within them, which then triggers a bit of a thought response and a curiosity response, which then hopefully encourages people to watch the video, which is essentially the purpose of clickbait, encouraging people to watch the video. And the goal of that is obviously the more people that watch the video, the more people that join the TFNL community, the more people that are part of the TFNL family, and the more people that I can hopefully help when it comes to spreading good information and debunking a lot of the nonsense within the industry, especially when it comes to things like training and mental health. Helping as many people as possible is obviously the goal, and unfortunately a necessary evil in the YouTube world is to do so. I do unfortunately have to play the game, which is playing the YouTube clickbait game. It is hard. I've spoken to many a social media professional about this, and it is what it is, unfortunately. It's just how YouTube thrives, because I think people typically do tend to gravitate towards, in a lot of cases, based on what I'm being told by these professionals, to more negatively worded titles, because it triggers a bit more of a response, which then encourages curiosity and views. So that's essentially why it is. And I do get quite a lot of title guilt from it, because I feel bad. Like, I don't like negativity, and my videos obviously, as you know, aren't negative. But like I said, to hopefully help and encourage more people into the TFNL community, I do unfortunately have to play the game. But I'm trying to find a steady medium with it. But oftentimes when I found that I've been maybe a quote-unquote less clickbaity, it is really shown in the analytics, and YouTube tells me to go away and doesn't seem to push my videos to not only potential new subscribers through the recommended page, but also to current subscribers, as I do often get messages saying your recent video didn't show up in my subscription box, which is a bit annoying. It's a bit of a shame, but YouTube is quite temperamental. And what I've kind of gathered and what I've kind of observed myself is that reaction-based content, like commentary content, like mine primarily is, tends to yield a better response from those negatively worded titles, whereas informative and science-based content tends to yield a better response when the title is a bit more based on certainty. So the best way to do something, the only way to do this. Not so much negative, but more certain. Less questions, more answers, if that makes sense. And another thing that does actually really work when it comes to the YouTube algorithm is physique images. Images in which you can see more of the body than just the face. If you know me and if you know my channel, that's not me. And my channel will likely never be about my physique and what I look like. I want my channel to be more about my personality, my values, and my information. And sometimes my humour, although I'm probably not as funny as I think I am. And Matt Does Fitness and a few others creators actually tested this quite a long time ago, where they basically did videos in which they kind of just showed the face, and then they did videos where they showed the physique, and the physique-based videos received a lot more clicks, which kind of solidified the assumptions. But as you know, that's just not me. That's not what I'm going to do. But yeah, but hopefully that essentially explains what's going on with the titles at times. I know it's frustrating, trust me, I wish I didn't need to do it, but I guess when looking at like optimizing growth of the channel and hopefully helping as many people as possible and encouraging as many people to the community as possible, it is a necessary evil, and until YouTube decide to change their algorithm formula, I must play the game, but I'm trying my best to make up for those negative titles with ensuring that my videos are helpful and as positive as can be. But again, that is it. That is a video. Like I said at the start of the video, 1,300 likes in the first 24 hours is the goal, so if you reach that, that'd be bloody splendid. I would very much appreciate it. If you haven't already, please do consider clicking the red button down below to subscribe to the channel, and maybe even the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. And if you have a question you want me to answer at the end of the next video, drop it down below in the comment section for comment question of the week, and I shall do so. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my science-based festival bucket hat, and thank you for tolerating the video.